Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we're going to be reviewing NINCAT on the Nintendo Switch. Now this game is a 2D precision platformer that just released on July 2nd of 2022, and it currently sells for a regular eShop price of $9.99. The game is published by Game Nacional, and it has an overall download size of only 40 megabytes. So does this feline ninja-based precision platformer offer enough to be worth your time and money? Well, that's what we're going to be figuring out in today's review. Just remember that if you are appreciating the content, one of the best ways to help support the channel is just to hit that like button. So today we're jumping straight into the gameplay because there really is no storyline either in the eShop description or the game itself. Now first of all, as I pointed to earlier, this is a 2D precision platformer, and it is on the fairly challenging side, but we'll be touching on that just a little bit later. Now the basic premise here is very simple. You're presented with 50 different levels. Your sole and only purpose here is to reach the end of each level. To do so, you're going to have to master a variety of platforming skills and also dodge different obstacles. Now, there are no enemies really throughout the game, rather it's a variety of traps and different pits. Now, there is a form of progression in the game because when you begin, you will only be able to jump, and you'll be acquiring a variety of abilities about every 10 levels. Those abilities will be the double jump, a dash, and eventually even a sort of kick maneuver to bounce back shurikens. So now at this point, you're maybe telling yourself all the basic elements are there to make a pretty decent precision platformer. And although at its base, I would say that you're right, for me, there was, however, a huge element that seriously hurt the gameplay. And that would be a huge inconsistency in the hitboxes of both your character and also the traps. Unfortunately, this game's hitboxes really don't line up very well with their visual representations. And I would say that that was the biggest element of challenge in this game because it brought an extreme unpredictability to your ability to maneuver around the different obstacles. Now, if you're looking at the screen right now, you'll see an example of what I mean. Your character's hitbox actually extends quite far in front and behind it. Normally, standing on the side of a ledge like this should not be possible. And although in some levels that will actually be helping you, in most levels it will hurt you because you'll be hitting spikes that you didn't actually touch with your animations. Not only that, but even the traps and spikes themselves vary in hitbox sizes from one to another. Sometimes you'll be able to get closer, sometimes you won't be even making contact and it'll count like a death. Now if you're telling yourself all you have to do is learn the different sizes of the hitboxes, trust me, what it does is it causes an extreme level of frustration where the majority of the difficulty comes in this game not from its actual level designs, but from its inconsistencies. Also, the game at different points in the levels actually makes you do quite a huge number of leaps of faith, where you sort of have to drop from a platform without being able to see the obstacles below you. And because the game depends on split-second reactions, it almost guarantees that the first times you go through these levels, it will be an automatic failure. Now personally, I'm a huge fan of precision platformers. Super Meat Boy, Celeste are among some of my favorite games on the Nintendo Switch. However, the reason why they're my favorite games is although they present an extreme level of challenge, that level of challenge always seems fair, and when you die, you can always know it's because you messed up. In this game, about 80% of the time I was dying, I felt like the deaths were unfair and unwarranted. So instead of failure leading to a feeling of motivation and wanting to get it right, it rather caused huge feelings of frustration. And for me, there's one basic rule that has to be upheld for a good precision platformer, and that's if you're asking for an extreme level of precision out of the player, well then the player has the right to demand an extreme level of precision out of the level and hitbox designs. Now on a final note, the game is doable and I did complete it. And for me, it was really just unfortunate that the biggest elements of challenge here were those wonky hitboxes, because were it not for that, it could have actually been a very pleasant experience. Now if we move on to the controls. Now the control setup in the game here, you can move using either the D-pad or the left joystick. So that is something I appreciate for a 2D platformer, that they did leave the option to use the D-pad. Following that, you have a 3-button setup where B will be your jump, A will be your dash, and Y will be your eventual kick maneuver. One thing, however, that the game doesn't really explain to you, and is actually necessary for completing some of the levels, it's that if you do a input between the jump and dash maneuver within the same frame, you'll actually do a 45-degree dash that can be chained together. I would have liked the game to actually explain this to the player, because although I'm experienced in precision platformers, I did think of trying it. However, a newer player might not do so, and they might stay stuck very early on in the game. But other than that lack of explanations, the controls were actually very responsive here. So at least on the control end of things, this game gives you what you need. Now if we get to the graphics and sound. Now graphically speaking, the visuals here are very muddy, meaning that if you're playing on a big screen, visually this game won't be very appealing. In handheld mode, however, on a smaller screen, it fares fairly well. But personally, I would have liked them to maybe be a little more precise in their pixel art work that actually might have even helped the overall hitboxes lining up with the animations. Now, performance-wise, there were no issues here, and I would have been highly surprised if there were. But graphically, this game was a little bit of a miss for me due to that lack of detail. As for the sound in the games, well, once again, the soundtrack here is fairly repetitive with a very low number of tracks. Now, the music itself wasn't bad, it just came across as very generic, and I actually had to pay attention to notice it. The sound effects also were very basic, with just some simple jump sounds, and a cat crying whenever you take a death. And trust me, in this game, there's going to be a lot of those, so get used to hearing that cat crying out. But once again, the sound design package was just okay. So now we get to the verdict. And if this is the first time watching one of my reviews, just to let you know, my full review scale is available down below in the description of the video. And in the case of NINCAT on the Nintendo Switch, I'm going to be giving this game a 5, putting it at the low end of a playable game. Now, as I mentioned at the end of the gameplay section, the game can be completed, and the levels, once you learn all those wonky hitboxes, you can make your way around the obstacles. Problem for me is that the experience was extremely frustrating and didn't leave you with a sense of satisfaction because you actually accomplished something, but rather a sense of satisfaction because it was finally over. Now in the end, this wasn't exactly the feeling at each one of the levels, and there were some points of the game that actually felt pretty good. It's just that for each one of those levels where things worked out pretty well, there was just one of those levels that felt really bad. Now personally, at $10, I really cannot recommend this game because there are a lot of very strong precision platformers on the Nintendo Switch at an equivalent price or much lower. So now I want to hear from all of you. Do you agree with my review? If you've already played this game, are you going to maybe be picking it up nonetheless? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, on the way out, if you did like the content, consider hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel if you aren't already, and clicking that notification bell so you know when all my future content comes out. And as usual, I hope I'll see you in my next video.